A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to, well, Nerf Secret Reveal Tears of the Clown. It's about time that I actually talk a bit about another lineup out there relating to Nerf blasters. But let's just say, before we even get anywhere near this one might just be the lowest of low when it comes to Nerf blasters entirely. This is itself a lineup that was made to compete with the likes of many other well-known Dart Blaster toy lines. Dart Zone, Adventure Force, Busby Toys, Zuru, X-Shot, and many others out there were pretty much trying to be better than Nerf. Sometimes they had actually succeeded because of one big thing: the price tag. Nerf is seen as a premium dart launcher brand, and as such, they have a bit higher prices than what we would expect to see from toy lines of any sorts. And so, Hasbro's Nerf line attempted to fight back against this error by creating their own line of less expensive Nerf blasters. And so, I'm proud to, well, not so proud actually, to present to you the Alpha Strike line. And so, zip! Here we are. Well, here I am again, down here in the corner, pretty much. I'm ready to showcase all the different Alpha Strike blasters that have been released since day one, in fall of 2019, all the way up until today, where they are certainly not a great series, and I can tell you that for sure, because what we're going to do here is we're going to give them all a ranking from S down to F, just to see where they all go, pretty much. And we're going to start off with the first 6 of them, beginning with the Stinger. Yeah, that's right. This is the same kind of name that is applied to a dart tag blaster out there, released back in the early 2010s. And so, that's why I'm going to give this one a new name, Spinneret, which is the type of thing that a spider has in terms of producing silk to make webs. And so, that's what this one's going to be, the Spinneret. This is in fact a Jolt of the Alpha Strike line. Seems kind of apparent that the Jolt design would catch on to almost everything out there, potentially becoming the cheapest way to have a blaster from almost every kind of lineup imaginable. In the same way that we saw the Big Shot become the cheapest and smallest blaster of the Mega line. We had the Knoll from the Elite line, the Blitz from the Zombie Strike line, and then of course we got ourselves many other add-ons that we would be able to see in other lineups over time. But for the Alpha Strike line, being that this was part of the first 6 that originally came out back in late 2019, the Spinneret is probably more or less just the same exact thing as a Jolt. A bit of a weird carbon copy that has a bit of a slight redesign, but it has the same exact sort of functionality. And doesn't even include its own finger guard, because this blaster is too small to have an actual hand guard, so it instead goes for a finger guard for the trigger finger to set in. And so, because it doesn't have that, well, I don't really know what I could say about this in terms of, well, how its design is supposed to impact your handling of the blaster overall. But in terms of its functionality, it's just no different than what a Jolt is. It holds one dart, fires one dart thanks to a little plunger situated in the handle itself. Pull the little thing down to prime it, a little priming rod, and then pull the trigger to fire. That's it. That's just pretty much where the end is that I can come up with for this one. So, it still is, well, it's not too bad by any means. And so, I'm going to put it in C for the moment. But now it's time to move on to a Quadrat copycat. This was the first reskin of the Quadrat at the time, known as the Fang QS4. And as I've mentioned before, there were a lot of other reskins that would come around. There would be a second Alpha Strike reskin, which I'll also talk about pretty soon. But the Fang QS4 was the first to show up. Being that it came out a few months after the Quadrat in 2019, it's pretty much no surprise that we would be able to see a lot of carbon copies of all sorts out there. Just a bit of a cheap way to gain additional profits. A way for Hasbro to try and not be very original. But the thing is that, well, this one is a bit of a whole different story as opposed to the Zombie Strike Quadrat, the likes of which that we never would have expected to show up. But man, the Quadrat itself was almost generic-ish, being that it had 4 barrels stacked on top of each other and had a bit of a night finder sort of feel with the priming rod situated above the handle and the trigger that you would pull back, and then because of its smart AR system, it would allow the darts to fly no matter what barrels are loaded and which ones are unloaded. But the Fang QS4 has a whole different feel. Its cheapness allows it to have the weird honeycomb sort of pattern, which is criminally bad by all means. And I could sure tell you firsthand that unlike the Quadra, which certainly does have a unique feel because of its design and all that, being the first copycat at the time, the Fang QS4 is pretty much flawed in most ways. And also being for the fact that it has that weird cheap feeling to it would mean eventual breakdown would become almost imminent. And so, at least with my overall experiences of handling the Fang QS4, I pretty much don't know where else to begin with this one. It's certainly not at all a good blaster. Probably not even okay. If anything, it's probably only slightly better than the likes of most other blasters, which I will get to very soon. And so, this is probably the first time I've ever done this, but we're going to send this one down to the E tier. So yeah, that's pretty much where it's going to be pretty much. But now, let's go ahead and move on to the Cobra RC6. This is almost like what you probably could get with most Rev blasters out there, but instead of a handle, you have a priming rod in the back. So, it's yet another sort of night finder feel by any means. It still has the same old weird cheapness that surrounds it, the same honeycomb sort of feel on the handle, and the somewhat shallow trigger pull itself. But the only difference that we can really identify with this one compared to the Fang QS4 is that the Cobra RC6 has an oscillating cylinder that is pretty much totally exposed. So if you're willing to store this in a really dirty area, well, good luck trying to clean a lot of this stuff out, because it might be difficult without the usage of some very professional tools. And so I feel like that's really going to impact my overall ranking of this blaster. And I do feel like that this one could have been way, way better than how it was originally designed, because sometimes the cylinder just doesn't work properly, and in addition to getting very dirty on the inside, you could expect this kind of plastic to eventually wear off over time rather quickly because of how cheap it is. But in any case, this one is probably not quite as bad as what we've seen with most other blasters in the series, but that's certainly not calling it a good thing by any means. So we're sending it down to D. That's where the Cobra's going to be, whether you like it or not. And now we're going to move on to the Wolf. Yeah, a sniper that would come out in the series entirely. And so, when you really think about it, having a sniper in the Alpha Strike line is almost like trying to provide a good car that is in fact efficient. But it's not at all. It is in fact powered by gasoline, like many things are nowadays. Which, as bad as it sounds, it sure does carry on to this. Like, trying to have that sort of unique sniper status, as it's been known for years on YouTube and beyond, having the Wolf around with you might not be the best idea possible. I've even expressed this with my own project, Nerf Secret Reveal Bolts of Intrigue, in which there's a scene that involves this exact blaster in action. I don't know about you, but I guess the only thing that would make it worse would be the fact that it does not have any modular compatibility at all, by any means. You can't even take off the barrel or stock to make it look smaller, and same thing goes with the scope. Everything's pretty much permanent. We would see the same thing unfold with other blasters over time, like with the Ultra 9, for example. It has a permanent stock, barrel, and scope. So that one at least did a whole lot better though compared to this. This one is in fact a one dart blaster with a priming rod on the back of it. It has a chunky scope, a not so significant stock, and a bit of a weird barrel to it. But hey, you know what? The only thing that I can find about this that actually does seem to be helpful is the fact that it does not have the honeycomb thing for the handle. So you know what? That only slightly makes things better. Like trying to put frosting on a piece of vomit. So, by any means, I'm not really calling this a great blaster. but at least it does better than most others that I've seen. It still is pretty sucky in terms of its usage, and so that's where I just draw the line and send it down to E, in the same way that I do with the Fang QS4. But now we're going to get down to some serious business and talk a little bit about the tiger. And this wasn't just any breed of tiger either. This was in fact the color scheme of yellow and orange that tried to flourish alongside its fellow brethren, but the tiger had some serious flaws put into it. Flaws that are just inexcusable, especially for a 2019 release like this. The tiger, first of all, had the signature fused plastic, which meant that you could not take the blaster apart and modify it to your liking. And the same thing practically applied to the Super line, which either I have mentioned or I have not, so now you pretty much know that both of these lines, they had started in recent years, and it was the beginning of a trend where Nerf decided to no longer allow modification by simply using a set of screws on one side of the blaster to be able to take it apart and mod it. And so, with both of these lines being entirely comprised of blasters out there that would not allow for this specific feature, this common trend online to take place, the tiger is certainly not out of the question for this reason. But apart from that common problem that's now present in today's society and in all of the economy, the tiger, of all Alpha Strike blasters that I've ever seen in my life, can just straight up go and die in a hole. A hole that reaches the center of the earth to a point where it perishes completely. So, enough said. We're sending this baby down to F. Having this specific honeycomb style handle, a pretty lousy trigger pull, and a pretty somewhat flimsy piece to it combined with some AR issues, as well as dart rejection, which is pretty much a process where a dart that gets loaded into the chamber tube ends up getting rejected or basically forced out by continuous air pressure that's badly filtered. So, in any which point, any of these kind of problems, they're certainly bad enough to put together into one specific horrendous piece of plastic. So, it's an F, a straight up failure. But now we're going to get along to the Lynx. This one actually had a bit of a different feel than most of the others so far. For one thing, the Lynx actually did kind of feel like what a grenade launcher would have been like in Nerf's lifespan. But yet we have seen a lot of hilarious attempts to have Nerf create grenade launchers by any means. We've seen them make missile launchers, rocket launchers, bows, crossbows, but never have we seen a blaster that pretty much has the sort of thing where you can break apart a barrel. But then, of course, in recent years, we were able to see this kind of thing take place, like with the Zombie Strike Sledgefire, being one of the most major examples at the time that you could break apart a blaster's barrel and it would double as the priming method. However, in this particular case, the Lynx does not utilize this specific sort of priming method in which the barrel can be broken open to where you can load a dart in. The Sledgefire would carry specific shells that could fit up to 3 darts in it, and the Lynx would not. It would just use regular darts, all at once, pretty much. It only had room for 1 dart, whereas the Sledgefire could hold 3 at a time, depending on your preference. And in any case, the way to prime the Lynx is instead done by a black pump that's situated underneath the barrel. And so, with that in mind, I feel like that just covers the basics that you need to know about the blaster and its overall functionality, and how it has in fact been able to at least try and recapture the specific feeling that the Sledgefire had provided us back in 2013, 6 years prior. I feel like though that one major flaw about this thing is just the fact that it's an Alpha Strike blaster. A very specific stigma gets attached to it, just for the very, very cheap quality, lousy mechanics, and very poor performance that's oftentimes underachievable by any circumstances. The Ultra line, the Super line, and the Rival line are the ones that easily outclass this line by any means. And so, you know what? The Lynx, apart from trying to recapture the Sledgefire, but ultimately failing, and also being the fact that, especially in my area, I was never able to get a Lynx of my own for a while. I could never find one in stores anywhere. That is up until more recent times. It would begin to appear in a few specific Kroger chains, and I was very fortunate that I was able to come across an entire section dedicated to the Lynx itself. And so, I was able to go pick one up, and as a result, I was able to own one. For a while, that is. But at this point in time, it's probably only a slight step up from what the Tiger had given us. Certainly no more than what we've seen so far from the rest of the line overall. So I'm putting it down in E. And so, that pretty much just concludes the 2019 catalog of Alpha Strike blasters. It was a very crappy time, by any means. However, Nerf would in fact try to use this to the best of their advantage to attempt to continue the lineup by any means. And so, in February 2020, we started getting hints of a few newcomers to the line. Starting with this one. This is in fact officially known as the Hammerstorm. But I've specifically said how many times. The Alpha Strike blasters are in fact named after anything relative to zoology. We had the first 6 blasters, which there was the Stinger, which kind of rips off the name of a dart tag blaster, so I've renamed it to Spinneret. Then you have the Fang, Tiger, Wolf, Cobra, and Lynx. But now you're just gonna go and give it names that probably would have been more suitable towards other lineups. Because in the year 2020, the Elite line, Zombie Strike line, and Mega line were still around. They each had at least 1 or 2 blasters released. And it was ultimately the last year for all 3 of these lines to exist. Because nowadays, we have ourselves the XL series, the Super series, and I feel like that the major thing that's replacing the Zombie Strike line right now might in fact be the Dino Squad line. It's pretty hard to tell at this point exactly where this is going to go. But in any case, I've given this blaster a new name. The Hammerstorm is called the Harpy by my accounts. Still, when it comes to ranking this blaster overall, being the first that I was able to pick up in spring 2020, I actually was kind of surprised at the time that Nerf was able to pull through and somehow make the series better. And that was pretty hard for me to adjust to. 6 blasters were craptastic. And at the same time, a lot of other things about 2019 were just too much to handle for me. When 2020 rolled around, however, we ended up catching a lot of breaks. The biggest break that we would ever hope for. To survive a pandemic was honestly the best thing that could have ever happened in recent years. To have a huge change in our lifestyle. To step outside of our comfort zone. Being that we've been going through that whole entire thing since late 2019, it's very hard to imagine a life without any of that. Plus a lot of other things. If it weren't for the boatload of other horrifying things that we had endured last year because of how much had already carried on from 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and sometimes even further than that, I probably would not have been the same as I was today. I would have been just a typical person out there trying to work, trying to do everything I can to get by. But here in 2022, we are in fact going to potentially have ourselves that kind of life again. We'll be forever rid of this kind of stuff, as it's done so much to us since 2019. But in any case, I actually do feel like that the Hammerstorm itself, well, yeah, you're probably just going to officially call it the Hammerstorm, not the Harpy, like I've always been calling it, but in any case, I feel like that the ranking on this one is rather obvious. It's got some great hammer action put into it, an 8-dart cylinder, a lot of dart storage, and some tactical rails, and a barrel adapter. That's right, this actually feels more like a Nerf blaster, as opposed to what we've already gotten in recent years. And so you know what? This might be one of the only times I'll ever put up anything good, but it's going up to B. Yeah, all the way up to that point. But now it's time to get on to the second in 2020 overall, known as the Flight CS10, of which I've renamed it as the Fossa. It's pretty much just a strife made for the Alpha Strike line. That signature cheap quality combined with no screws, of course. So to access the battery compartment needed to power the flywheels, it's a bit of a cheap build. But in any case, this one is also not bad by any means. With a few minor tune-ups here and there, you can expect this one to be better than the likes of many other crappy motorized blasters that we've had in recent years. And yeah, that's pretty hard to take in, just to know the fact that an Alpha Strike blaster can apparently do better than even the likes of Elite, Modulus, and Ultra. That's very hard to take in at once. And so, with that in mind, this one's going into C. So, that's pretty much the Fossa for you. And now we're going to get on to some more stuff. Why don't we go ahead and talk a bit about the Otter QS4. Of course, they officially call it the Optic QS4, which came in a set that also included another original blaster, the Vanguard LR1, of which I renamed the Vol. So Otter and Vol, two other animals, one that's very well known and one that's not so well known. But we're going to talk a bit more about the Otter first. It's a little more than just another Quadrat reskin, but this time with some extra pieces. Some slight molding changes, a more refined grip, some better priming rod action, a bit more smoother in comparison to the Fang QS4, and not to mention an added scope. And so, I feel like that this one's just a major upgrade over the Fang QS4, but that really is saying something. Considering how awful the series was from the very get-go, the very start alone just proved to us that Nerf can be a horrible company. But yet they were able to do a lot in 2020. For us fans, for us creators, for us reviewers, of toys or otherwise. So the Otter QS4 I consider to be probably the best of the series thus far. And as a result, we're taking that one up with B. So, Harpy and Otter are pretty much met up together. But now let's talk a bit about the Vol. The Vol LR1 was included in the same set as the Otter was. But let me just tell you, when talking about blasters that are simple in design, pretty much, it's fine, pretty much. When you're talking about something that's like jolt-sized, with nothing but a small plunger tube, the capacity to fit one dart, and a priming rod, then you probably don't have to put up a lot of criticism about anything like that. Yet when we're talking about this kind of blaster, you'd normally expect a lot to come out of it. This could probably have been a clip system blaster. This probably could have been even a motorized blaster because of the overall shape and size of it. Yet none of that was ever put together in this. And to top it all off, the Vol actually has a lot of issues. Being that, well, similar to the Tiger and a handful of other blasters I've talked about before, it's got AR issues, and so the air restrictor just rejects the darts constantly. And that is a huge disappointment. But just to note that the big size was already bad enough, they also added a bit of a pointless hand grip apart from the regular grip in front of the blaster. It's got a priming rod which is not terrible by any means, at least in contrast to other priming rod blasters I've done. And let's also not forget, the rest of the blaster is nothing but dart storage. That might be good in the long run, but because of the size of the blaster, there could have been so much more to it. Way more than you might imagine. And so, I'm sending this one down to E. End of story. And now we're going to talk about the Maco RC6. little more than just a Cobra reskin with some added extra black plastic to it to make a stock and a hand grip to it. Not to mention a priming handle. Enough said. And also because I can't even find this thing around, I feel like that just by going in way deeper, it probably wouldn't matter too much. And so, we're sending this down to D. Certainly not at all like what the Vol and other blasters I've talked about were like. But now we're going to go ahead and get to the lowest of the low. And I'm specifically talking about the 2021 releases that have come by so far. Beginning with a little thing called the Uppercut. It was originally a 2020 release, but that was mostly an international thing. We didn't necessarily get our hands on a bunch of Uppercut models, either in orange or in blue. Yeah, that's right. This is the first Alpha Strike Blaster to officially be in the color of blue, which a lot of Nerf blasters have put together, but just looking at my notes on this thing and looking at plenty of other horrifying things I have never quite imagined would exist with this thing, this is just what you might imagine to be something that is a straight up failure. And I can give you why. Lots of reasons why. Because the Uinta has hamp action. All you gotta do is just insert a dart into the barrel, hold it up like so, and then slap the underside of a small pump on the bottom with your hand. Like, the way I see it, it's as if Nerf could not possibly get any worse. And being that it was early 2021, I even have a photo to prove all of this, that I actually went ahead and got suckered into buying one of these. $3 it cost at Five Below, which I never would have expected to find one. I mean, finding an Uinta at a Five Below, like, come on, that would be like finding the latest PS4 game in the middle of a Home Depot. I mean, if that's like the only sort of thing that we could have, that would be a whole new equation based on confusion in terms of shopping. Like, where to find the best stuff that you're interested in, and all of a sudden it appears in the one spot you would never think to check out. But a Five Below, I mean, I'll just let it go. I've also found Hot Wheels there occasionally and other stuff that I certainly like to have around. But at the end of the day, the Uinta is without a doubt the worst ever excuse for a Nerf blaster. And I have mentioned this before in my top 15 worst blasters I ever owned video, but that just goes to show Nerf literally does everything at this point. They want to pretty much just deliver the worst of the worst. At the same time, they want to give us the best of the best. I mean, we got blasters out there that are just so amazing out there, like the Zombie Strike Contractor, Super Eagle Point, and Ultra 3, for example. And then we get this. The Alpha Strike Uinta. Without any doubt, I'm setting this down to F. Like, I don't even know anymore. So without any explanation on anything else, pretty much, this is what you get in terms of having a tier list based on the Alpha Strike series entirely. And with that in mind, I shall say thank you guys very much for watching this whole thing from start to finish, getting to know about the many gripes I have over this series. And the fact that it's still going. Yeah, actually not long ago we were teased about an upcoming dual pack of Lynx blasters. One will be covered in solid orange and one will be solid blue. Pretty much mimicking towards the Uinta entirely. One's orange, one's blue, and now we're gonna get Lynxes that'll be orange and blue. So, if you think that's bad enough, then who even knows what'll happen in the future. But you know what? If you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.